Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to another episode of Intuitive Angling. And man, I really appreciate you guys watching the video and spending a little bit of time with me. Just always appreciated and very grateful around here. We are going to show you guys how to tune a crankbait and a jerkbait today, guys. Now, this is not as simple as it sounds. A lot of people say, oh, you just bend the eye and call it good. There's a lot of different ins and outs to it. There's a lot of different variables. If you don't do it right, sometimes you can damage your lure, and if you do it right, you can get your lure to do things that most people can't get their lures to do. So we're going to have a sort of an in-depth tutorial on that. Also, guys, just real quick, I want to invite everybody out there. If you haven't had a chance to consider, you might want to consider joining the channel and becoming a member of Intuitive Angling, because members get every week you get like 2 extra videos that aren't seen by the public. A lot of times I share some secrets with the members I don't share on the regular channel. Some access to my personal email address, and if you guys are interested, just go to my YouTube homepage and click the join button, and you can get all the information for that there. So much appreciated. Okay, guys, I think that everybody is familiar with tuning a crankbait or jerkbait, which is basically, if you're not, let me give you a real fresher. It's like tuning a jerkbait or crankbait is basically moving the eye, taking a pair of needle nose pliers and turning the eye one specific direction to get it to run straight. Because normally what you do is, say for example, if you throw your crankbait out there and it's running off to the side, to the right, you bend it to the left. So you bend the eye the opposite direction of the direction that the lure's going. And most of the time it'll help you guys also, if you turn the lure upside down, you get a better grip on that particular eye right there. So that's the way to do it, with some fairly small needle nose pliers. That is the basic concept, but there's a lot of different details to that. Now, first of all, let's talk a little bit about the need to adjust lures. When I started fishing fishing a lot back in the late 70s, and all the way up really until probably the late 90s, the quality control on crankbaits were not very good. And the eye ties that were used on a crankbait like this, or jerkbait, for example, like this, were not like they are like on the Megabass. On the Megabass ones, the eye ties are actually molded into the body where they can't come out. But it used to be on crankbaits that the eye ties were just screwed in there with just like a little bitty screw. And what would happen is when you would adjust the eye tie on there, a lot of times it would strip out that little screw in there, and it would never stay in the position that you wanted it to be in. So you could adjust a crankbait out there, and 4 or 5 casts later it was running crooked again because you stripped it out, and then we had to like super glue it to keep it from doing that. Real big pain in the butt. So different depending upon the crankbait or the jerkbait that you're using. Some of them were easier to adjust than others. I'll give you guys an example. The old DD22, Norman DD22, that's one of the greatest fish catching crankbaits out there of all time. But the quality control on that bait, in my opinion, was pretty poor years ago, because when you tried to adjust the eye on a DD22, it wouldn't hold its position. It would just like strip out there. And that was the problem with a lot of different crankbaits, not just the DD22, but a lot of them out there. So anyway, the new designs where they're molded into the body makes it a lot better. Now guys, if you buy a crankbait or jerkbait from a high quality manufacturer like Megabass or any other premium tackle company, very seldom do you have to adjust a lure, but sometimes you do. I mean, sometimes there's just something about the manufacturing process, whatever, that maybe it needs a slight adjustment. It doesn't need much, or maybe they got banged around sometime, or maybe you had them laying on the floor of the boat and somebody stepped on it and bent it off to one side. The reason that you have to adjust it is not really the issue, but the main thing is you've got 3 different considerations to factor in when you want to adjust a crankbait or a jerkbait. Number 1 is, most of the time you want that crankbait or the jerkbait to run straight. You don't want it running off to the side or like that. You want it running straight, because what that will allow you to do is, if you're throwing a jerkbait or a crankbait like this, you can work it harder or reel it faster, and it will track true all the way down like that. And if it's not tuned right, the faster you reel it, the more it's going to come out to the side. So that's why the adjustment is necessary. But there are some situations, excuse me, or you perfectly want to, or you purposely want to adjust the eye where it runs to one side. Now, one of my favorite things to do, like for crankbait fishing, let's say for example I'm fishing a boat dock, and let's say here's the boat dock right here, and I'm throwing my crankbait down, it's running down the side of the dock like that. You can take and you can adjust the eye and like turn it to the left here, and what will happen is when you're reeling it past that boat dock, it'll run off to the side under the dock. So that's sort of like a purposeful thing. So you throw it next to that dock, crank it down, and it starts to run off to the side. It gets underneath that dock, and it'll trigger strikes from fish that are not willing to come out if it just comes straight past the dock. And I've had tournaments before, like down at Grand Lake, where I'll have, say for example, if I was cranking something like this S-crank, I would have 3 different S-cranks out. I would have one that was tuned off to the left, so when I threw it down one side of the dock, it'd run underneath it. And then once I got to the other side of the dock, I don't want it to run the same direction because it would run farther away from the dock. I tune it the other direction so it'd run under the dock on the other side. So I'd have one bent to the left, one bent to the right, and then one that was straight anytime I just wanted a straight dive and crankbaits. Now that's a high specialty technique, but it is pretty effective with that. But the main thing, guys, is most of the time, especially with like a jerkbait, you want the thing to run straight, because when it's running straight, you're getting better action out of it, and you can work it faster without it blowing out. A lot of times on a jerkbait specifically, if you don't have it adjusted just perfectly and you try to jerk it real hard, it'll blow out to one side and you won't get your depth out of it. So it's very important to get your crankbaits and jerkbaits to run straight to maximize that depth out of it. And like I said, there's a lot of different things that will mess that up. You can say, for example, your crankbait can be running straight, and then all of a sudden, you get hung up on a rock and you're torquing it and pulling it real hard from one angle. It'll bend that eye just tiny little bit, just enough to get it to run bad. Or you could hit it up against a rock and you could bend it just slightly. It doesn't take much. And one thing to remember, guys, is when you're tuning your crankbaits and adjusting the eyes on them, make little bitty small incremental bends on there. Don't like bend it very far at all. Just barely turn it, and then put it in the water and run it next to the boat and see how it's running, and then make your adjustments until you get it to run straight. Most of the time, if I have one that's not running perfectly straight, I'll have to adjust it and run it by the boat 3 or 4 times to get it perfectly right, because every adjustment that I make with it is just minuscule. You don't want to jack with it and bend that eye out too much, because it's just another thing that can damage the crankbait if you do it wrong. So anyway, guys, pay special attention to it. One of the things that you always want to do when you throw a crankbait or jerkbait in the water is run it alongside the boat, before you start fishing. Make sure it's running straight, make your adjustments, and it just can add up to a lot more fish at the end of the day. So hope it helps out. We'll see you guys later.